Ooh, what's up, guys? Void here, coming back at you with another deck tech, and this time we have this badass son of a bitch here. Look at that. Look at that artwork, man. Look at that. If that's what you look like when you're dead and you come back, I might just have to kill myself right now. This guy is fucking insane, man. This is basically going to be making Burn viable in Commander, which before we have like Nightgusar decks, we have Omnath Locus of Rage, and that's like the closest thing we have to Burn decks, which are pretty cool in their own right. But this guy is even better. He's more likely to fit into that burn strategy because of the fact that he's mono red, and there's so many good synergies with his effect here. So let me just read it off here if you don't already know. He has Afflict 3, which means that whenever he becomes blocked, he deals 3 damage to that defending player, and that's pretty cool. Makes him very viable if you want to make a Voltron build around him, but that's not really the best way to build around him. It's just my suggestion here is that you use more or less just burn spells and other things that hit multiple opponents. So you get his next ability here, which you get to add 1 red mana to your mana pool for each 1 damage that is dealt to your opponents this turn. This is only during your post-combat main phase, so keep that in mind. So let's get on to the deck here. First thing we want to do is we want to get the best possible mana we can get. So you're obviously going to be playing your Soul Rings, your Mana Crypts, and so forth. Just good mana artifacts. In addition, we also play Ruby Medallion and Fire Diamond because we're mono red. We play Doubling Cube because that's a lot of red mana we're going to be getting, and being able to double it all. I mean, we can dump it all into some really cool spells and are awesome finishers, which I'll get into later. We have Extraplanar Lens, Gauntlet of Power, and Gauntlet of Might. We're obviously also going to be playing Cage Sun to double our red mana off of our mountains, and it's very important to have as many of these as you possibly can. The more mana we can dump into our spells, the better. We also play a pretty cool artifact here in Cryptolith Fragment. It becomes flipped if each player has 10 or less life, and that's most likely not going to happen, but the cool thing about this is that it taps for 1 mana of any color, but the advantage here is that it does help us get more mana by dealing 1 damage to each player when it's tapped, so that is really powerful earlier in the game when we need mana as well. Since this is more or less based around Neheb and protecting Neheb, we want to have some decent equipment, and obviously some of the best options here are Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Darksteel Plate. Very good at giving him either Hexproof, Shroud, or Indestructible. And in addition to that, we want to be on the offensive more often than not, so we have Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice, and Sword of War and Peace. The last 2 have some synergy when dealing damage to our opponents, so if we get that off, we get more mana in our post-combat main phase. And Sword of Feast and Famine is just great for untapping our mana and just getting to do more things in general, and just very good cards. And definitely, if you want to lean towards the Voltron build, I would highly recommend you play these swords. To get extra combat steps, we have Aggravated Assault and Fury of the Horde. Aggravated Assault goes infinite with Neheb, and obviously you want to protect Neheb, and if you have something like a Darksteel Plate on him at the same time, you can basically go infinite because of the fact that he has Afflict, and unless your opponents can do something to deal with that before you just start attacking, you're going to keep getting more red mana. Get the red mana, you get to put it into Aggravated Assault, you get to keep on tapping Neheb, and you get to keep attacking with him over and over and over again until you eventually win off the Afflict. Even if they have something big enough to block them, you can just keep dealing damage with the Afflict, and that's how that goes infinite right there. And let's get on to the next part here, which is the rest of the deck. It's pretty much just going to be burn and ways to take advantage of our massive amount of mana that we're going to be getting here. First thing we have here, we have Chandra's Ignition, Earthquake, Fiery Confluence, Fault Line, Price of Progress, and Acidic Soil. Obviously, all these, basically what they do is they just deal a massive amount of damage to each player. Most of the time it's also going to hurt you, so keep that in mind. You are going to want to work quickly when you're playing this type of deck, and these cards definitely help you get a ton of mana. And what we're going to be using for that is to dump it into our other burn spells, which I'll get into later, and our Eldrazi, which I'll also get into later. We also play some really good burn cards here, our permanents that just sit on the field and help us get more and more damage and get more mana in the long run here. We have Chandra, Torch of Defiance. If you don't cast the spell, you get off her plus. She does deal 2 damage to each opponent, which is really good. It synergizes well. Perforos, God of the Forge, 2 damage on each creature ETB of yours, so synergizes very well. Pyrohemia, we can just dump a bunch of mana into it, and it's just going to either nuke the field or also deal a ton of damage to each player, getting you a bunch of mana your post-combat main phase. Fanatic of Mogus deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red, so it's good for that use. And Gutter Snipe, we play a lot of instants and sorceries in here that deal burn damage, so it's going to help us get ahead in terms of we're not going to be dealing too much damage to us compared to the massive amount of damage we're going to be dealing to our opponent, and Gutter Snipe definitely helps keep us ahead. And Heartless Haitsugu is just absolutely devastating. Halving everybody's life total is ridiculous, and it's definitely going to net you a ton of mana and most likely win you the game if you have the right cards to use that mana for. Now here comes all the cards. This is basically the mana dump here, and we have some awesome Eldrazi, of course. Whenever you think of a deck that's able to generate a lot of mana very easily like this deck is, you want to have some Eldrazi to put that mana into. You don't want to end your turn with a bunch of floating mana just emptying out of your pool. You want to be able to use it, and we have Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, Emrakul, the Promised End, and you could also play the other Ulamog. These are just 3 right here, and there's other options too. Very good cards, and definitely they're going to put you in a position to win the game. You have the Annihilator off the Kozilek, you have the ability to exile permanents with Ulamog, and you have Emrakul just being a monstrosity and just awesome all around. We also have Walking Ballista, Banefire, and Bonfire of the Damned. Walking Ballista is very interesting in this deck. You're able to dump a ton of mana into it. Walking Ballista is just hilarious. If you have a situation where you just have a massive amount of mana, you can just dump it all into Walking Ballista and just kill a player off. It's hilarious. And Banefire and Bonfire of the Dam are basically one-way cards where you're going to be targeting one opponent and just letting them have all that damage, and this is basically a finisher here, what you want. And all these cards kind of serve their own purpose. They allow us to put our mana into something, and there's a whole bunch of other cards you can put into your decks to have a similar effect. And last but not least, we also need consistency cards, because this is very important. We have a way to get a ton of mana, but we're not always going to have the best cards in our hands, so we need to focus on our card draw. In addition to your basic consistency cards like Senseis, you also want to play Faithless Looting, Wheel of Fortune, Reforge the Soul. There are other options as well. These are just a few just for reference. And all these do, they just basically help cycle our hand out. They help get a ton of card draw, and that's what red does really well. You can draw a ton of cards, but you're also going to be discarding. That's the only drawback. But hopefully when you play this deck, you will find more often than not, you just want to see as many cards as possible so that you can efficiently use your mana. And that's the most important thing. But yeah, this is very focused around trying to get out Eldrazi or other big spells, or dumping all your mana into something like a Banefire. Very useful having that mana that you get in your post-combat main phase from the Heb. Just a very awesome dude. He looks badass. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. Let me know if you want me to do other ones. I will most certainly do that. And stay tuned for other awesome videos. This is Void Mage Gamer here. Thanking you guys for watching. You have a wonderful day. Signing off.